Let it all go and flow with the grace that washes through your days, whether you received it gently or with all your quills raised to defend against invaders. Take this on faith. The mind may never find the explanations that it seeks, but you will move forward nonetheless. Let go. Let go, say Buddhist teachers, into the vastness of the unknown, connecting with your true home, your true nature, which is timeless, boundless, and free. These are wise words, and still, all too often, we find ourselves clinging to what we know, staying with the familiar, trapped by the next shiny thing, like a fish dazzled by a bright metal fish hook, and then, one way or another, landing in that frying pan once again. For many of us right now, that frying pan is full of our fears, worries, anxieties about the future and the present, keeping us from living in the here and now. It's very hard to break this cycle of suffering. It really has us in its grip. That bait looks so good, and the open sea seems so far. It's almost a dream. So much easier to stay with what we know, what seems safe, even if it is painful. The story of the Buddha is that the young prince Siddhartha was brought up in a walled city where his parents made sure he would never see sickness, aging, or death in plants, animals, or people. As a young man, he started to grow restless and have suspicions about this life. And so, leaving the walls of the kingdom, he immediately saw people who were old, sick, and dying. He experienced suffering for the first time. After many years of journeying, he experienced enlightenment under the Bodhi tree and spent the rest of his days teaching the Four Noble Truths. Suffering exists. There is a cause for suffering. An end to suffering is possible, and there is a path to that end. That is the Dharma, what we call the Dharma. Suffering exists whether it's physical pain, mental, like stress or anxiety, emotional, like loss or heartache, or spiritual, feelings of being lost or unworthy. The cause of suffering, say the Buddhist teachings, comes from attachment, our attempt to control the outcomes of our lives. We can already see this in young children, frustrated by their inability to complete a school task, in teenagers longing for connection and turning inward to depression or outward to rage, and as adults. You don't get the promotion and you're upset. Someone has opposing political views and it starts an argument. You don't get a response to a text and you're insulted. The car in front of you is driving too slowly and you're frustrated. We're attached to a particular outcome, things that are beyond our control, and that causes suffering. Buddhist teacher Tara Brach describes how we create what she calls a spacesuit, a small self of the ego, to meet our needs and to protect ourselves from harm. The ego's self-appointed function is to help you get what you think you need from the world and prevent you from losing what you have. It's fueled by fear and sees threats everywhere, and that leads inevitably to feelings of separation, loss, competition, judgment, grasping, and deep loneliness, in other words, suffering. Yet as much as this protection, the spacesuit, is for our survival, when we identify with the spacesuit and think we are the self who is angry, judgmental, anxious, or admirable, we fall into a kind of trance and end up losing touch with the mysterious presence which always underlies our fleeting thoughts, emotions, and actions. Thinking about this reminded me of the time that my sister and I took our dad, then in the mid-stage of Alzheimer's, to our house at the Cape for the day. Our neighbor invited us to take his 12-foot wooden sailboat, Herreshoff, out for a sail, and my dad eagerly accepted. We got into the boat, and Dad took the helm, grabbing the main sheet and telling us to cast off. As we left the safety of the small harbor, my sister and I, sitting across from each other, exchanged looks. Though Dad had been sailing all his life, he hadn't been in a boat for several years, not since his diagnosis, and we were a little concerned. As we approached the channel, it became clear that we would need to come about to make it safely through the narrow passage. And yet Dad kept the boat headed toward the shore. My sister and I exchanged looks again. I held my breath, and just at the last possible moment before we would have run aground, my dad called out, "Ready about," and brought the boat around. There was a lot to unpack in that short sail. But one lesson for me was that my dad, in spite of his diminishing short-term memory, was truly tapped into that deeper place of knowing. He was swimming in the ocean of deep knowing, connected to these waters he'd sailed his whole life, not blinded by the hook or worrying about the frying pan. And for a little while longer, that was the gift of his disease. The small self of the ego, the spacesuit, had become permeable, and he lived more in that mysterious space that holds all of us if we let it. Let it go, Donna Folds tells us. Let go of the ways you thought life would unfold, the holding of dreams or expectations. Let it all go. Save your strength to swim with the tide. Let go, and the wave's crest will carry you to unknown shores beyond your wildest dreams or destinations. But it's not that easy, right? We're so trained for expectations, for goal setting and checklist, ambitions for work, relationships, our bodies, every aspect of our lives. How could we let those go? And if we did, we'd want a guarantee of happiness, right? Of course, there are no guarantees. After Siddhartha gained enlightenment, he traveled throughout the country to spread his teachings. During one of his travels, he came across a woman who had lost her child. When she learned that the Buddha was visiting her town, she pleaded with him to bring her son back to life. He agreed to her request, but asked her to bring some mustard from a house that hadn't seen death. As she visited every house in the town asking for mustard, she realized that there was not a house that had not witnessed death. This is a powerful teaching. No one escapes death. And this brings us to the wisdom of impermanence. If we can learn to accept that nothing is forever, not our failure or success, not losses or gains, not even our lives, that wisdom offers us a path to freedom. Some UU minister colleagues of mine became obsessed with an app a few years ago. You might have heard of it. It's called We Croak. And all one word, We Croak. You can check it out. It was inspired by a Bhutanese folk saying, "To be a happy person, you must contemplate death 5 times a day." At 5 random times during the day, because death doesn't have a schedule, it sends a message. Don't forget, you're going to die. Then you can open the app for an inspirational quote like this one from Alan Lightman. "A very dark night sky seen from the ocean is a mystical presence. After a few minutes, my world had dissolved into that star-littered sky. The boat disappeared, my body disappeared, and I found myself falling into infinity." This app, We Croak, is an invitation to a moment of breathing and contemplation. The founders of the app say this: "Each year, as the pace of death quickens, it's easy to feel a little panic. Our first impulse is often to run. If instead we can lean into death as a mindfulness tool, peace awaits. Accepting vulnerability helps us live saner and happier lives. We can prioritize what's important to us." Now, leaning into death may be too far of a reach for many of us. Leaning into discomfort might be about as much as we can handle right now. Taking refuge in the wisdom of impermanence, the realization that everything changes, nothing is forever, doesn't mean living a life where we don't suffer, but it does mean having a little more breathing space, a little more freedom as we face our own suffering and that of others. These days, as Margaret mentioned, I'm working as a hospice chaplain with many opportunities each week to accompany people facing death. It's hard work, but it's also a privilege to be with folks who can no longer escape the reality of the end of their lives, to sit with them as they face the unknown, to offer comfort, peace, presence. And more than once, they have been the ones that I felt comforting me. Facing the inevitable has a way of crystallizing what's really important. There's no more time for pretense as we reach for peace in each precious moment. Take this on faith, says Donna Folds. The mind may never find the explanations that it seeks, but you will move forward nonetheless. The three jewels of Buddhism are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha is you and me, our own pure, open-hearted presence in the flow of things, aligned with what is, and with deep connectedness to the family of humans. The Dharma is the path, based on teachings from poetry, beauty, nature, the arts, as well as from Buddhism. How to bring wisdom, compassion, and awareness of what's most important to living our lives. And finally, there's the Sangha, the community, which we have right here, gathered in mutual caring, seeking truth and justice, staying together in good times and in hard ones. I'll end now with these words by Buddhist teacher Jonathan Faust. Teach me what I cannot learn alone. May our fierce and tender longing fuel the fire in our souls. When we stand side by side, let us dare to focus our desire on the truth. May we be reminders, each for each other, that the path of transformation passes through the flames. To take one step is courageous, to stay on the path day after day, choosing the unknown and facing yet another fear, that is nothing short of grace. Friends, may we indeed be comfort and company for each other on this path of life. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen.